Okay, David, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself, please? Tell us about the Great Friendship Project. Thanks.
Cool. Yes, so my name's David. I'm going to try to see if I can get a sort of presentation up to share with you. Hopefully the technology doesn't let me down. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, it's perfect.
I see some nodding. So yeah, I'm David. I'm the founder of the Great Friendship Project. I'm here with our research colleague, Professor Jennifer Lau, who'll be talking a little bit more about the project that we're working on together. But I thought I'd just start just for people who've not come across our work before to just give a little bit of an introduction about who we are, what the Great Friendship Project does. So we are a youth-led non-profit set up back in the aftermath of the pandemic in 2021. And our focus is around sort of tackling loneliness amongst young people, and we do that in 4 key areas. So the one main way, and which we're going to be talking a little bit about today, is our sort of main intervention, and this is through helping young people, particularly aged 20 to 34, foster connections through community activities that we run throughout the week in various parts across London. We also work on research, which is where Jennifer and I connect, programs to tackle those young people who we know are at greatest risk. So groups that we know, such as unemployed young adults, young men, and looking at how we can tailor support and programs to address those specific groups. And finally, working around sort of campaigns to tackle some of the stigma that exists around loneliness, help young people realize that they're not alone in their experience of loneliness, help them to sort of tackle some of the things that stop them reaching out for support, and hopefully break down some of those barriers that can sometimes stop young people from actually building strong connections in the first place. So that's a little bit of an overview of why we work. So in terms of why we exist, so there's sort of a range of data out there at the moment. You might hear the word loneliness epidemic, or there's particularly the epidemic of male loneliness. There's all sorts of terminology, but that is well documented in sort of research, growing amount of research that's looked into this. So around 60% of young adults now report experiencing loneliness every week. We now have the highest rates of loneliness in that age group in the whole of Europe. Contrary to kind of, I suppose, what the outlook might have looked like 10, 20 years ago, young adults are now around 5 times more likely to experience persistent, ongoing loneliness than those over the age of 65. There's a range of different reasons why that is. Obviously, we often talked about the sort of the collapse of third spaces, the rise of the digital world, the amount of time young people spending with friends has about halved in the last 10 years alone. I won't go into all the factors that led into it, but one of the things that we've seen is that actually young people, to my point around the stigma, are still reluctant to reach out and talk about loneliness. So around 81% of young people wouldn't even admit to a close friend that they're experiencing loneliness for fear of being mocked or judged. And so actually this is a sort of a cultural and societal phenomenon, but it is existing in still many ways in the shadows because these things aren't being spoken about on a basis of one-to-one amongst young people. So around about 1 million young people across the UK are now experiencing this sort of persistent loneliness. And so for us, it's we exist purely to start to address that crisis and start to create solutions, pathways for young people to build friendships, and bring about the sort of change of narratives, the change of policies that are necessary to bring this epidemic that we're seeing to an end. So in terms of kind of our intervention, so we've been running this, as I mentioned, for around 4 years. The sort of guiding principles of what we do and why it works is we try to create regular, consistent spaces where friendships can build from 1 week to the next. So we operate around 3 to 4 activities. All of those are designed to be extremely low cost or free, so that young people, money and finances is not one of those barriers that prevent young people from accessing the support. We are sort of largely very scalable, so we have most of our activities can be attended by up to 100, 150 young people at a go. We have developed a wide program of activities, from board games afternoons to picnics to social walks to activity nights, all designed to be engaging, so that keep young people coming back again and again, to help them explore new interests that they might not have otherwise things that they might not have otherwise done, discover new passions, and actually sort of really tap into some of the very best things that there is to do in London, that we hope will also lead to sort of greater confidence and sort of new interests that they can take on outside of our activities. They are all sort of intentional, so we design it with the friendship focus. So everyone there is in the same boat, either struggling with loneliness or really feeling like they need to build their social circle. And as a result, you tackle that first layer of stigma, because you feel like you can talk about kind of the struggles of making friends, you can talk about the challenges of loneliness, and actually we find as a result people are more welcoming, people are more vulnerable, and that intentional space makes it more likely for those friendships to prosper, because they know that the people that they are connecting with also want to are looking for connection as well. Our work is very data driven, so we've been feeding in 4 years worth of data from feedback, from member requests in terms of what activities they'd like to see, in terms of things around attendance, and building that into our model to make sure it's refined as possible. We also try to build in all the sort of best practice in terms of social connections, so things that we see that works in terms of building friendships, things that come out from the DCMS's research around which interventions are most successful in tackling loneliness, looking around loneliness data and working out which groups that may need extra support as we help to equip them. And finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, our program is youth led, and so as a result, they see young people who look like them, who reflect kind of where they are in life leading this work, and it helps tackle the stigma, as it means that young people feel that there is no sort of top-down situation, no paternalistic vibe, and everyone, again, it just helps support that feeling of everyone being in the same boat. So yeah, since 2021, around 50,000 young adults have accessed our intervention. One of our evaluations of our service showed that 77% had built new friendships, 73% had report that reduced social isolation, and we had big plans to try to look to expand that into new areas, to run new campaigns, new programs. We've done a bit of work with other local authorities, so we've worked with Sutton on a very hyper local intervention there. We've supported a few other local authorities across London around their loneliness strategy, but we have big plans to try to sort of expand our kind of mission in those areas that I mentioned. Since that time, since 2021, our campaigns have reached over 40 million people. You might have even seen our Lonely Million campaign back earlier in the year. And we've recently been recognised at the One Young World conference, or summit, sorry, as one of the leading youth-led organisations building a more socially connected world. So in terms of the research, which is why Jennifer's on the call with us today, we built this partnership several years, a couple of years ago, to help really understand better the model, who it supports, the core mechanisms of why it works, build our kind of evidence base, because we want to really be able to build on that sort of evaluation impact that we saw, be able to strengthen our funding case as we look into building into new cities, address this big research gap, because traditionally this area has been overlooked in terms of loneliness interventions, and finally look at tests to the feasibility of a random control trial ahead of a larger evaluation. So that's a little bit about the project and the research. I'm going to pass over now to Jennifer, who'll be able to talk a little bit more about some of the research questions and kind of what we're hoping to achieve with the research.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Yes, as David said, so I'm from Queen Mary. I'm the research partner of this UKRI funded project. So first of all, just to say it's been a pleasure working with David and his team and evaluating what seems to be a very impactful intervention. So just to outline some of the research gaps to you very briefly, this is the definition of loneliness that we use in the scientific literature. So I think I just wanted to put it up there to kind of say that it's a little bit different from social isolation. So this is a subjective experience where you're not happy with your social world, with your relationships and your support. And it's also a little bit different from solitude as well, where people want to be alone, either to reflect on something, to have their own space. That's actually a kind of a preferential tendency. So this is a state where people are not happy with it. If you go to the next slide, please, David. Thank you. And loneliness in some ways is a normal response. We all experience it from time to time, usually quite fleeting. But for some people, it can be prolonged and persistent. And so that's when it can become more of a public health issue. And we know, for example, that loneliness, intense loneliness or prolonged loneliness is linked to both physical and mental health. And there are examples here in the slide. But it's also possibly through its impact on health, there are also impacts on education as well. So young people who experience loneliness are more likely to not do well at school, not stay on in education, which then has repercussions for employment status and in particular unemployment later on. And so because of all those kind of direct and indirect consequences of loneliness on health and things like education, it means that loneliness has this kind of burden societally on us, on the economy. So there's an estimated cost of about 2.5 billion per year to UK employers. So next slide, please. Thank you. David's already touched upon young people being one group of the population that are at risk for loneliness, a relatively underrepresented group. So most of our work in loneliness is with older adults, who's recognised much more of an issue there. And more recently, especially with the pandemic, it was also recognised that young adults were experiencing loneliness to high degrees. And within that, we also know that people from minority ethnic groups can experience loneliness to a prolonged degree as well, which then links it to other kind of social determinants of health. And we know that males, people who identify with being male, are also at risk for loneliness too. This is a bit of a contentious issue, and some people aren't sure if they experience loneliness to a greater degree, or it's that they don't often seek help for it. But regardless, we know that loneliness is an issue in these groups. And we also know that there are place-based factors as well. So London has for a while been listed as the loneliness capital. And we know that in other urban environments, there are high levels of loneliness too. Having said that, it's also important to recognise that, that there are other issues in rural areas and communities too, particularly around accessing activities. So there are all these things around loneliness. So why is it a priority? Well, we know that these interventions for loneliness are lacking, particularly evidence-based ones as well, particularly for young and working age adults. As I said, there's much more for older adults. I'm not saying that that's all optimal and great too, but we know that there's a particular gap for this group. And in London and urban areas in particular. And so that's why I became interested in the Great Friendship Project. So it was great to kind of be working with David. And he's already mentioned how the Great Friendship Project tries to address some of those issues around reducing loneliness. So So we have put together with David and his team, and also other people who are familiar and have actually accessed the Great Friendship Project, a kind of a representation of what that intervention is all about. So this looks very complicated. It's called a logic model, and often what we do, it's a way of systematically representing the different components of a complex intervention or program. So on the right, you can see that what we want to achieve through this intervention is to reduce loneliness and therefore health, societal costs associated with loneliness. And we envision that there are kind of short, medium, and long-term outcomes. On the left, you can see some of the inputs that we need in order to deliver this intervention. But I suppose what's key to us is thinking about what are the mechanisms of change and what are the active ingredients that are involved. So sometimes if we think about why certain medicines work, we might think about the active ingredients. What is it that's benefiting people? So we have developed why we think the Great Friendship Project works in reducing loneliness. And it is about creating meaningful interactions between people, fostering a sense of community, and kind of having this positive feedback loop so that if you form friendships, you feel included, you're more likely to go out and seek friendships rather than stay in at home. Next slide, please. So the aims of the study we've already kind of touched upon briefly before, but we really want to see to seek evidence for the Great Friendship Project to see if it's reaching the groups that we think are vulnerable or who don't historically access help for their loneliness. And also we are beginning to collect data as to whether or not this program is beneficial. If we go to the next slide. So we have used some data that David and his team have been collecting. This research does have ethical approval. And what we really wanted to see is, who is accessing, who is coming to the activities, and are we reaching these groups? And we also want to see whether or not some groups are more likely to stick with it than others. So, are they attending more of the activities and events? So if we go to the next slide. So we found that there was a wide range of people, a wide range of number of activities that people attended. So from 0 to 84 across people. But the mean number of activities attended was 2.3. But the variance around that was quite big. So it suggests that perhaps for some people, they kind of go to them and it really, really works for them. And I think this is consistent with lots of programs for loneliness, is that one size does not fit all, but the people who do go seem to be committed. Most of the members are between 25 to 29. About half of the people whose data we had were males. And also we had a good range of a good diversity in terms of ethnic minority groups. There wasn't really any particular age group or gender or ethnic group that predicted the number of activities that people went to, which suggests to us that there's no systematic bias, that it's not that it benefits or one particular group is accessing it more. So hopefully that means that there are no barriers that are linked to those characteristics. If you go to the next slide. And as I said before, we're also beginning this feasibility randomized controlled trial to look to see whether or not before and after there is a reduction in loneliness. And we're still collecting data at the moment, but we have begun to interview people who have been to the Great Friendship Project. And these are some of the things that they've said, which I think they're quite self-explanatory. You can have a quick look at them. So I guess the next steps for us, if we go to the next slide. Okay, so these are some of the messages that we wanted to leave you with. Again, they're pretty self-explanatory, but this is just the first step in trying to get evidence for interventions that can be delivered in the community that can be reducing what seems to be a public health issue. In particular, they seem to be reaching some of these groups that are harder to reach. And hopefully our research will continue to contribute towards understanding the cost effectiveness and impact of these approaches, and also some of the barriers and facilitators of delivering those. So last slide, I think. So these are just our next steps. We are completing data collection. We'll be looking at the data and hopefully disseminate those findings. And we have prepared a link for you for anyone who would like to hear more about the research as we go into the final stages of seeing what the evaluation is telling us. So thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much, Jennifer and David. Really, really wonderful work. Any questions for either Jennifer or David? What people are thinking? Joe, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, I've always got questions.
Good.
I think it's an absolutely fantastic initiative, and I think, yeah, really, really pleased to hear about it and excited to see where it goes next. My question is to do with the training that's provided to volunteers, and I suppose, you know, we've done a lot of work in North Central London around that kind of gatekeeper approach of recognizing people might not contact kind of formal services, but trying to maximize the opportunities where if someone's reaching out for help, the person they're speaking to is able to support them. So yeah, it'd be just really good to know. I appreciate a big chunk of the training would be around facilitation and just holding the group together. But if there was any sort of mental health training offered, even on a kind of fairly light touch basis, or whether that's something you would be interested in the future.
So we've done quite a bit of sort of training with our volunteers. Most of it is sort of in-house and we've got sort of a lot of our community and some of our sort of leadership who've worked in sort of some Samaritans and Mind and other organizations that have helped us. We also work quite closely with voluntary councils and like sort of through partnerships we've had. So we've had a bit of mental health training, but always open for more training. Anything that we can refer our volunteers to complement also the training that we provide would be, yeah, definitely very helpful.
Sounds great. I can put my email in the chat. Feel free to get in touch.
And I'll also, as Jennifer said, I'll also drop that link for anyone who else wants to reach out around the any sort of collaborations or just to hear about the keep track of the research as it develops.
David, that'd be great. And I guess how boroughs can easily just help promote it, because every borough will have young people with their supplies and will be really helpful. I guess something easy for them to promote the project, that would be fantastic, so that they make sure it gets to the right places. Sandra and then Kim, thanks so much.
Yes, I'm wondering if the research is looking at the AI solution to loneliness at all. Well, supposed solution to it, and especially for young people, given the problems that there are with the online world.
Yes, we do have some colleagues who are beginning to explore that. I think we've got sort of colleagues on both sides, colleagues who are kind of thinking about some of the harms and the risks associated with young people, you know, asking ChatGPT for advice and all that kind of thing. But I suppose on the other side, we do have some colleagues who are looking at kind of, you know, whether or not you can begin to recognize if a young person is feeling distressed by something that they're saying, for example. So it's a recognition thing. And then possibly in some of these kind of interventions that are more about kind of identifying solutions, possibly within that, but in a very structured and safe environment. It's not something that I am working on, or my team and I, but I'm aware kind of these other developments. Thank you for the interesting question.
Thanks so much. Kim, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just put a link in the chat. There's also a number of other maybe helpful, useful resources for anyone in this group, actually. But in particular, the trauma-informed practice training. That's a free 8-week that you can sign up to. That's actually been developed with psychological trauma consultancy Nicola Lester, and it's been running on the Thrive London website for quite a while. But that's free training for any of your volunteers and that might be interested in it as well.
Thanks so much, Kim. Really helpful. Rosa, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just a quick one because I'm conscious of time. I was just curious you said the next step was to complete the research phase before you start the analysis phase. So I was wondering what that looked like. Are you hoping to hit a number because you seem to have got quite a large cohort already, or are you looking for thematic saturation? I was just hoping you can give us a bit of an insight into your current and next steps.
Yeah, I didn't share so much about each step of the research, but part of the research was to look at existing members. So the data that David and his team shared with us, so who is going. But separately to that, we kind of recruited new people into the study and said, and randomized them. So you can, try out the Great Friendship Project, or you complete a questionnaire, once every 6 weeks, I think it was. And the idea was to look at the change in loneliness in those two groups to see if hopefully a reduction in loneliness in the intervention group would be greater than just completing it on two separate occasions. So we are at the kind of final stages of that. Recruiting people into a research study to do that, I think their characteristics are quite different from the people who naturally sign up for it. Hopefully, we'll be able to find that there are benefits, but we haven't yet looked at that yet. But thank
Well,
you.
please do share your
Thank you.
findings when they're ready.
Thank you so much. I'm just conscious of time. David, there's a question in chat about strategies for overcome language barriers. Could I ask you just to reply to that, please, if you can? Okay, thanks so much, Jennifer and David. That was absolutely fantastic.